Hi, you're with Julian on the Browno and a review of the horror movie Barbarian. Very acclaimed, low-budget horror film. As with my previous review, Smile, I nearly watched these films back to back and I kept comparing them. In the critics' world, Barbarian has got much more critical kudos than Smile, which has got a lot more box office. Zach Kreger, debut directorial film for him, starring Georgina Campbell in a decent start. She turns up at this house in this horrible, dilapidated area in Detroit, which I appreciate because they don't show that side of it until daylight. So everything looks nice at night. But she turns up to an Airbnb where she's got a job interview the next day, and there's a guy staying there. It's double booked. Who is Bill Skarsgård, who was rubbish as a clown in it. The opening 45 minutes are her navigating, the distress a woman would feel in that situation. And a big part of this movie is different kinds of masculinity. So we get in the second half of the film Justin Long representing toxic masculinity, and Bill Skarsgård representing a much more benign, empathetic masculinity. The duality of man. So we get this very long sequence where her natural defenses are up and, she won't have a cup of tea from the guy. He then learns to wait until she comes into the room to open the bottle of wine. So we get a sort of very positive sort of guy. And then she discovers that in the basement there is a room with a very old mattress, a camera pointing at it, and a bloody handprint on the wall. Pretty scary stuff. The guy goes down to check it out and disappears. She then finds that not only is there this room, there's another door, and there is a complete labyrinth complex, like a dungeon underneath the house, and they encounter something very, very unpleasant indeed. And then the movie jump cuts. And I thought that was one of the strongest elements. It goes through 3 stages, and the cinematography and feel are very different in each stage. So my brother watched it with me, and he was like, "Are we watching a different film? Are you sure you haven't screwed this up and we're watching a different film?" Because it does feel like a different film until it winds its way back. Justin Long, great to see him. He's doing another film at the moment, and he's like a veteran from like Die Hard 4 and even younger than that. So it's good to see him back. He plays an actor that was caught up in the Me Too movement, sacked from his role in an upcoming sitcom or drama, as the lead actress has accused him of rape. And pretty quickly we find out that he's a really toxic guy. And he becomes involved with the Georgina Campbell and this labyrinth complex. Now, I constantly found myself, like, this has got great acclaim. I often wonder if critics are, use shorthand. The fact that this touches on certain sort of Me Too and feminist ideals tripped them over to believing that this was an important film. It is a much more impressive, thematically filmed than Smile, which is a rote horror. Nothing new on the table there. It's much more imaginative, and it's nowhere near as good a film. I would reverse the reviews from Smile to this any day of the week. Smile was in the pocket of something like Sinister, but even more so, the horror and the dread started from the first scene and didn't let up the whole movie. The 2 worst things about this film is there's an awful lot of downtime. There is so much downtime in this film, and the other really bad part of it is that the characters aren't really well developed for me. They seem in the service of the themes. So we get the Bill Skarsgård character for the opening 45 minutes where virtually nothing happens, and then he's just dismissed. It's like there are lots of dead ends in this film where things happen over a protracted period of time that just serve the themes of the story, but don't actually go anywhere. Like, there was no real, other than exploring those themes, there was no purpose to his character existing, and that is an hour, 45 minutes in an hour and 45 movie. People are saying it's scary and it's full of dread. It isn't. It is. It is. There's a couple of jump scares. There's virtually no dread, which is a shame because the setup had potential. If they'd have done it a little bit more seriously, the setup had the potential for an awful lot of dread, but there isn't any. And the last third, I did really appreciate any film that goes gonzo like this does. Love that. But it introduced a silliness that undercut the dread. So I didn't find this a very scary film. Smile played it straight throughout, had a brilliant soundtrack and soundstage, and was expert in handling the chills and full of much more dread. As Sosie Bacon, brilliant performance, wipes the floor with anything here, fell into psychosis. I found this much more ordinary. I just felt there were lots of themes hanging in the air, which were interesting, but I don't think, there was too much dead weight in this film and there were too many dead ends, and I didn't think that any of the characters, maybe Justin Long, but I didn't think anyone really meant anything. And there are some silly moments, which again, I like the gonzo nature of these things, but it does undercut any sort of seriousness or sense of dread or chills, which are in the reviews saying about how scary it is. But honestly, from the title and from the reviews, I expected an awful lot more here. I immediately knew that there was no way I would ever sit through it again. Once you spend 45 minutes through that opening scene where you don't need to see it again. And then what's there is sort of padded out and denuded by, when it flips to a third sequence, there is a sense of dread through that. It goes back in time to the 1980s, and it introduces sort of urban decay in Detroit. Again, another theme that I thought was really good. But it doesn't really pursue it effectively. And the last third is dominated by some visual effects that are clunky enough that it really undercut what I was watching. And resolving that storyline that happens in the 80s, it was a bit trite and a bit pat. And then we get some real silliness towards the end. Again, two of the elements of, one of the elements in Barbarian and one of the elements in Smile that both appear in the last third are visually quite similar, but done much more effectively in Smile. So I found this a real letdown, and I think critics have just praised it for its themes, which are good. The film itself, I didn't think was. So Smile, I'm only going to give a 5.5 out of 10 to. Probably worth a once through, and then you'll say I'm not 100% sure I was happy that I bothered, but I'm definitely not going to watch it again. So Smile, a 5.5 out of 10.